Hi, and it's Sunday, maybe, which means it's time to start looking at some of the more interesting comments that appeared on my videos from the last week. First of all, I am delighted to announce that it is no longer summer. This was brilliant. Actually, earlier on in the week, one of my students in my lab was applying lip balm, which I had to point out, don't apply cosmetics. Oh, it's only lip balm. And I had to point, the conversation went weirdly, but it eventually got to the point where I had to point out that it was still summer. She was, oh, it's winter. No, it's summer. And then we went into a whole thing about what does, this is probably appropriate here, does and does not constitute summer. But I am now delighted to say that it is definitely not summer now. The equinox has been and gone. It's even a little bit nippy here. This is fantastic. I live for winter. I love winter. Because the weather's never too bad where I am. But it's certainly, it can be any number of things. But what it cannot possibly be is hot. Anyway, let's first of all get onto the mailbox winners from last week. And it was indeed Mbari Village and in Shadow Moon Valley. Alternate Universe Drenor there, yes, specifically Shadow Moon Valley in Warlords of Drenor, Shadow Moon Valley. We're not going to be able to go through very many more of these. I'm actually running out of some of these. But we'll give you a nice easy one for today. I'll see if I can actually manage to get to the end of the year, and then before I end up having to drop this, before I run out of mailboxes that aren't, because I can't really pick ones that are swarming with NPCs. This one was actually quite tricky to get the angle where I wasn't getting too many NPCs in there. And even then, one sneaked its way into the corner there, but never mind. Right, so on to the first one. And we might as well tackle this one first. So it says, I'm sorry, Thete, but this was almost unbearable to watch since you rant on stuff that you have wrong info about that you could have looked up yourself within 2 minutes and been accurate about. No one would have said anything if you took a few minutes to go to Wowhead or MMO and read the cliff notes and then... I don't know what cliff notes are, by the way, but I take the context. And then discuss them. Well, so basically what happened on the stream, on the Azerite review, is I came home and I worked late on Friday. Not late, as in into the night, obviously, because I have to do the Azerite review. But it's a later leaving work on a Tuesday because we have things that we have to do. And so I get home, get some tea, which is where I come from, is what we call the meal we have in the evening. I don't drink tea, I just eat it. It's not solid, it's not actual tea, it's dinner. And get online, get ready, half an hour before the stream. Oh, Ian Hazacostas going to do a stream tonight at exactly the same time as me. Or occupational hazard. At this point, it's like, oh, what am I going to do now? So obviously what I did was I streamed his stream on my stream so we could discuss it while it was going on. Then something went wrong with my stream. I do not know what. To this, I don't know whether it was because maybe there was an extended period of time where I wasn't saying anything. I don't know whether it's an automatic thing on YouTube where it goes, oh, they're not doing anything, or we don't want people streaming and basically being AFK. They're not contributing, so we'll just shut it. I don't know what it was, or whether it was just a shut off. It was nothing to do with my internet or anything like that. So I don't know what that was. But the bottom line was, while I was trying to get it back again, because shutting the stream down and putting it back again didn't solve the problem. It took 3 goes for it to actually work. And it may have even been a Twitch wobble, because YouTube don't like anything to do with Twitch. The fact that I was playing Twitch in the background. I don't know how it knew that. I really don't know how it knew that. But anyway, I don't know what it was. But the bottom line was, I came back, I'd missed some of what he'd said, so I asked people, oh, what he said. And so there's 2 things about this. The first about is the fact that it's based on wrong info. Well, there's actually 3 things to say here. One, it wasn't even really based on wrong info. Because what I was ranting about, if I was ranting about anything, I don't know that full rant, but okay. It was Alliance and Horde having a different experience. Now, what I had picked up from what someone said was a different boss. They were completely different bosses. But there's 3 ways to have a different experience, which we've discussed in the past anyway. One is that you actually have a different boss for Alliance and Horde. 2, that you have basically the same bosses, but with at least one of them as a cosmetic difference. They're the same mechanics, but they look a bit different. And the NPC looks a bit different, but it's otherwise the same boss. 3, you do it in a different order. Now, it doesn't matter which of those 3 are. It's a different experience. And what I was arguing against was, if it's a different experience, then for one group, it's going to be easier than the other, which I'll go over in a minute. So that was the thing there. So what I picked up from what someone was saying was different boss, and what it was supposed to be was different order. But of course, you know, when I was talking about it, I talked to the camera. Hello. Which means I can't see comments, which are a different part of the screen. And... but then there was people in the comments going, no, you go. But I don't unfortunately see that until I pause for breath and then look at, oh. But the thing is, though, it wasn't really wrong. It's a bit like me saying, actually from a tweet I saw today, it's a bit like me saying, I don't like apples. I do like apples, by the way. But it's a bit like me saying, I don't like apples. And someone, you know, and me, someone bringing me apples. No, I don't like these. I don't like, you know, apples. And then calling them Golden Delicious, and someone saying, no, they're actually Granny Smiths. Doesn't matter, it's still an apple. It's the same thing with here. What I was arguing against was different experience. It didn't really change anything. But anyway, on to the next point. So it's about, it says, oh, you could have just looked it up 2 minutes and no one would complain. Yeah, sure, no one would complain. But the issue was, there was nothing to look up, because you only need to look something up if you're not sure about something. Someone said a thing, therefore I was sure. All right, I was wrong, but I was still sure. In a situation like that, if this ever happens, the only way to completely, you know, if you're thinking about, okay, how to learn from this for the future, there's only 2 things to do in this particular situation. One, the situation was caused by the fact that without any warning, Ian Hazakostas was going to do a stream at the same time as I was. And so there's no possibility for to plan for this or anything like that. So the learning points is, 1, I could cancel my stream. That's a bit drastic. 2, given that what happened, I mean, I edited it and edited out the first bit, but that still didn't seem to solve the problem. So the second thing is, I can just not make it available for viewing after the live stream. But of course, there's a lot of people want to watch it after that. And at what point do you then find a start point to edit it from? It just gets messy. It just gets messy. So I don't think there's realistic anything to do about that. But anyway, coming on to the main point then. So, you know, what I was arguing is the different experience. So what I was saying is things like, it doesn't, you know, just saying, oh, well, it's only a different order, but it's the same bosses, doesn't make any difference. That's no different to actually having different bosses, because some bosses are easier than others. For example, we know from Aldi, we know from every raid that's ever existed, the last boss should be the hardest boss, and generally is. It's the one that takes the most pulls, for whatever reason. So even if you say, okay, well, the last boss is going to be the same, which I think now is the case, but if there's the order of anyone's even in between, let's say, for example, on the Alliance side, the first 3 bosses are all dead easy. So in the first week, any sort of mythic guild that's prepared for it will definitely kill the first 3 bosses. Then let's say for Horde, those easy 3 bosses are in positions number 1, 2, and 4. There's a more moderate one at number 3. So then that same guild, but on the Horde side, same quality of players, same roster, same everything else, may only get the first 2 bosses. They may not get that 3rd boss. It's a little bit of a step up. And you could argue, okay, well, but in the second week, they'll probably get that 3rd boss, then they'll get the 4th boss really easily. That's fine. But you see, the first guild, the Alliance Guild, got 3 bosses worth of loot in the first week. That's literally 50% more loot. And at the start of a raid tier, that loot is always, you know, the item level boost on it is always realistically going to give you a big upgrade. It's almost like it doesn't matter what you get. Yes, there are some pieces you want. Like I remember Antorus. In the first week, I got some, they may have even been Titanforged boots. Warforged or Titanforged boots. I can't remember, but some boots. Now, there were plenty of plate boots in Antorus, and these were not the ideal stats for me. But it was so high item level that I was always going to equip them anyway. It was always going to be a definite upgrade. No even need to sim it. And in BFA more so. The only way a big or a significant item level upgrade is not an upgrade is if either the balancing of the secondary stats is out of whack or the balancing of the Azerite traits is out of whack. Now, they've done a much better job on the secondary stats, so that shouldn't be an issue. I mean, for small item level upgrades, yeah, you still sim. But for largish ones, for example, when you're going into a new tier, it should definitely be an upgrade. So that's 50% more things that are certainly not going to be disenchanted or go into waste in some other way. That then has a knock-on effect for the second week. So one guild is now better prepared for it with the gear. And then that has a knock-on effect on what they might kill in the second week. And it just carries on like that, and they'll just diverge. So that's the issue, and that's what I was arguing with. They shouldn't have a different experience at all. It should be the same experience. This idea that Blizzard want... I mean, this has always been the reason why World of Warcraft has never really been about Horde versus Alliance. People rant and rave, oh, it's good, always hard on Horde, always Horde and Alliance. No, it's not, and it never is. And the reason it never is because the narrative is driven by the raiding. No different in BFA. They're trying something different, but it's no different. And that means that you have to have a common enemy. Now, whether the Alliance and Horde team up to fight it or do it independently, and then we find out in Warcraft Chronicles later on who actually killed the bosses, that's different on different expansions. But, you know, we have to have that common enemy. So what they're trying to do here is still somehow give us a different raiding experience. But it's not realistic. One way will be easier. They can't balance it. This is the reason why 10 and 25 man raiding stopped, because they can't balance. They can't make it the same or equivalent experience for any differences at all in it. But anyway, there you go. Right, on to the next one. It's about the world first race. There was a world first race. It says, it was a really interesting race. I was looking at the method stream, and during a pull, I got invite to my guild's raid for the evening. I closed down stream mid-pull. Around 7 minutes later, I heard in guild chat that method just got world first. You missed it, preparing to raid yourself. Oh, how annoying. But anyway, never mind. So it says, Limit was ahead, did have sub 2% wipes. And they had decided to extend the lockout of the raid. Method did re-clear. It was a gamble by Limit, and they did not make the correct choice. But that's a hindsight thing, isn't it? You're 100% sure that if Limit had done a re-clear, they would have gotten world first. But they didn't know that when they decided to extend blah, 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 which is true. And I said this in my video about the world first. It's a horrible decision to have to make. You know, so you're an American guild, so you get the reset a bit earlier than the EU. And you're in position, potentially, to get the world first. And what do you do? Because if you re-clear, you don't know how long it's going to take. There were some tough bosses you've killed. You don't necessarily re-clear quickly. It might take a while still to get those bosses. And in the meantime, you don't want the European resets to come and go and method to sneak the #1 spot. Especially if you believe that you can kill it without any extra loot, which of course they did. Tough one. It is a tough one. It's impossible. We can't possibly say that if they'd re-cleared, they would have done it. They still may not have done it, and it's still possible they could have done it without the re-clear. I mean, by all accounts, from what I can gather, people were saying that never mind sub 2% wipes, they were getting sub 1% wipes even. I felt for them. I really did feel for them. But I'll tell you what it did show is it showed that there was an actual race. You know, I think some people just take the fact that because Method got it first, oh, it was always going to be Method. Yeah, I said it would be Method before, and it was Method. It almost wasn't. It was actually a very fine margin. But there often are very fine margins as well. There have been fine margins before. It's just that what I hope happens, without any disrespect to Method, which someone actually said in another comment that they're just the most awesome raiding guild that's ever been, which they are. They put it on a level, a professional level, quite unlike anything we've seen before. But it would be nice. It's all very well a competition being really tight, you know, really down to the wire. But if it's the same one that always sort of pips the other one to the post, it can get a little bit stale. I still think it's interesting, but so it would be nice if Limits did get one, maybe the next one. because then it would show that there is a proper race to even the people that don't really seem to be impressed by the small margins, and Limit could have done it, but then didn't. So it's always nice to share around who's going to get the world first, much like we had in Legion. I mean, people seem to forget that Method did not get all the world firsts in Legion. You know, so... Which is why I thought Ian Hazacosta's tweet about, oh, the closest race I can remember in years. I'm thinking, no. But of course it was, you know, the thing that is different to certainly what you can't remember for some years is where there's been a North American based guild in the mix as well. That makes it quite exciting too. But I did feel for them. I felt for them for that decision that they had to make. Horrible decision. It's almost toss a coin decision, is it? I wonder if they did toss a coin. I wonder how they actually decided in the end. Was it a vote? Did someone just go, well, let's just go with it? Or did they actually draw lots or something like that? Interesting. So the next one, also related, says, Method sure made a point about getting Blizz to host and probably award prizes for raid races. Something Method raid team members were pointing out on every interview during the last expansion. Looking back to the PvP finals and the MDI, where there was a prize involved, and the current viewership and money contribution to Twitch, there is a point to be made that maybe Blizzard should now strongly consider sponsoring these teams and hosting some kind of world first race. Yes. I mean, the fact that Method would have been saying this in interviews, I don't think necessarily adds to the debate there, because ultimately they are going to be the beneficiaries, at least now and then, of any extra prize money that may come their way. So they have a vested interest. But for everyone else, it does show. I mean, the maddening thing is, when I was looking at the comments as well, so I was talking about the fact that there was some comments even now, because you get the usual thing, oh, no one's really interested in the world first race. Now when Blizzard prove it, 270,000 people tuned in at either during or just after they'd got the world first into the various Twitch things. The vast majority of those are SCO's Twitch, but there were other Method streamers as well. And 260,000 people, over 250,000. That on its own is interesting. I wasn't one of them, and there would be many others that weren't actually tuning into their Twitch stream who are still interested. Some people may be asleep in Australia. Some people may have just been a bad time for other times at work, something like that, or just me doing something else. So yeah, you can't really get away with saying there's not enough interest in it. But yeah, I do think that Blizzard could make more of a thing about it. I guess one thing that would make it maybe tricky, maybe not, is the fact that would Method actually want Blizzard to host it? Given that Method gained from themselves effectively hosting it, the fact that they were streaming their own progress. I mean, look at how many extra subs came SCO's way on that day. You know, a few tens of thousands of dollars worth, I believe it was. So, and also the fact that, okay, Method wanted to do that. Other guilds may still not want to do that. And for it to be hosted in that way, other guilds would have to get on board with it. Or what if, you know, Blizzard just simply promoted it? But how would they promote it without and offer prize money in a way that... Because I think for prize money there has to be a spectacle side to it. If other guilds didn't want their gameplay broadcasted. So there might be an element to which there also needs to be some willing from other guilds, and I wouldn't blame them if they didn't want to get involved in that either, because technically it can cause a bit of a downside. There is a reason why, you know, guilds pushing for world first or just high world ranks, because the 6 guilds killed it now. There's a reason why they keep everything private. They don't, you know, they don't want their rivals seeing how they're doing a particular boss, because they might have a really kick-ass strategy for a particular boss, even if they're behind some others, and they don't want to give that away. So, I mean, I think a lot of people would have considered that the decision by Method, which was not the decision by the Raiders of Method, this was corporate Method, to stream their progress, may have caused, I don't know, it may have caused a little bit of consternation in terms of, well, we may be jeopardising getting the world first. But from corporate Method's point of view, they would rather, because it's ultimately a business, they would rather, you know, make a load of money and be seen as hosting the world first race themselves and come second than come first and not be able to cash in on it effectively. So, you know, that's ultimately the way that goes. But is there something more Blizzard could do? I mean, they've moved tentative. I mean, we've now got the leaderboards. I mean, that's something. It does all seem very tentative for me. I don't think they need go too far into it. I mean, it's not a good esport, is it, Raid? I don't even think the AMDI is a very good esport. I think, you know, if you're going to watch people playing a game, it does need to be in a PvP context. As a spectator, I prefer playing... Well, in World of Warcraft, I prefer playing PvE. In other games, it can vary. Warhammer Online, I used to prefer the PvP, but that's because the PvE was shit. But the PvP was very good. But nonetheless, if I'm going to watch something, I would only want to watch PvP. I wouldn't want to watch... Like, I prefer playing dungeons and raids, but I don't want to watch people doing them. I'd much rather watch people in an arena, even though I don't like playing that game in World of Warcraft. It's the same with some sports. There are some sports I used to love. I used to love judo. I used to love badminton. Don't enjoy watching them. Whereas I do enjoy watching football, but I was never really much of a footballer. I mean, a bit of five-a-side football, maybe. I was more into judo and badminton and rugby. Whereas rugby is one that I used to enjoy playing and watching. Same with cricket. So, you know, that's the way it is. Just sometimes sports, I think, are just naturally good spectator sports. And there are other sports that are just naturally poor spectator sports. And I think PvE is not great for spectator sports. So, quite what Blizzard can do about it, I don't know. Because if they're going to award prizes, there has to be some spectacle from their point of view to host. I'm not quite sure how that would work. Maybe some of you have got some firmer ideas that you could throw in the comments below. And we could maybe tackle those next week. Next one. So it says again, listen, Thete. Okay, listening. If getting world first got you hot, word that I think meant ladies in the case of gentlemen and gentlemen in the case of ladies. In the USA, we'd have all the top 20 guilds. But since Asmongold's mom is the best at world first gets you here, Limit is happier with second. Asmongold's mom might be quite hot for all you know. It might be Madonna. You know, she's getting on. She still looks good. I don't think Limit is happy with second. No. But I tell you what I did like, and I had to say this again before, is the fact that Limit... Because I think a lot of people either have short memories or just have only been playing the game for a few years. And I said this before. This idea that, oh, it's always going to be Europe that gets the world first. Because, you know, we don't have to work. What? This has always baffled me about Americans, actually, as well. This sort of paradoxical thinking. It's like, you know, we're the richest country on earth, but we can't afford to give our citizens healthcare when poorer countries can. And other countries don't have to work, but they pay more taxes. How do we pay taxes without working? And everything's more expensive in other countries. So how do we afford that without working? Weird. It's all weird. I don't know where this comes from. Someone explain to me where this comes from. But yeah, it was absolute nonsense. You know, the reason why it's been a European guild that's been getting the world first for a few years now is simply because there hasn't been an exceptional North American guild. There are several guilds in Europe that have just become exceptional compared to the older days. Method, of course, top of the tree. But Exorcist, Paragon were all and are all exceptional. Exorcist sort of seems to wax and wane. I know they tweeted they were not at all happy with themselves. But in terms of oh dear. But to get the world first, you have to become exceptional. Not just get the best players, but have the best organisation. It's now military level planning to get a world first. The planning and preparation that goes into it is immense. The logistics of getting a world first now are so much greater because the bar has been set so much higher. And it was just coincidence. It just was a coincidence that until now, an American guild just hadn't done that. Limit now have. They've shown that they've done that. And long may it continue. I hope it does continue. Because, you know, I think the Aldia race put paid to two misconceptions. One, and I don't know how people ever had this misconception, that people, you know, are not interested in the world first race if they're not actually in the race, which is nonsense. We watch races all the time. You know, no one would say, why are they putting Usain Bolt on the television? No one's interested in that race apart from the people racing against him. Doesn't make any sense. Plenty of people do it. And it's not just people who run, but just not quite at that level that watch Usain Bolt. People who've never ran in their lives watch him. Just like with the world first race here, there's people that have never raided that watch it. If they can. This time they've been able to, and they've proved it. They've proved that they watch it. So, and the second misconception is that there's some word, you know, that in Europe we all sit around doing whatever we want because no one needs to work. Or if at least if we choose not to work, we don't have to work. Absolute nonsense. So it's put paid to that as well, thankfully. Come on, Limit, actually get a world first as well. And then it'll be all marvellous. Right, next one. Oh, no, this is the inevitable comment that would come after it. It says, I'd like to see the resets get changed to worldwide, though that would make maintenance hours weird for certain areas, I suppose. Yes, it would. You would be potentially asking one region or another, their workers, to come in at the dead of night to do it. I don't think that's very fair, and I certainly don't think it's plausible. I don't believe that there's a difference in the resets to give North America an advantage. I think it's just the way it's worked out to get the resets as close together as possible, whilst at the same time still being done during normal business hours. I think that's all it's about. I don't know that this is a terribly realistic at all. Also, you could potentially end up with a situation where your maintenance is occurring smack bang in the middle of one region's raid time. Like peak raid time. That's not helpful. That's not at all helpful. I don't know. I don't think they can do that. I mean, I know, going to the next bit of the comment, it says, Limit was really close. I can't help but predict those who would devalue a US world first due to earlier reset. I don't know that it's always an advantage, though. Limit had a 1% wipe on Monday. And yeah, okay, there will be some people who would do that. And you can't rule it out when the race is that close. And more specifically, when it's dying very early on in the second reset. Because that's the issue. If the boss, the last boss, if raiding was tuned such that no one's killing it for at least 3 resets, then that few hours advantage disappears completely. But that's not the case. There used to be a situation where you would have gear check bosses, which would be basically like, you ain't killing this boss, no matter how good you are not killing this until you've geared up a little bit in the new raid stuff. On the earlier bosses, they don't do that anymore. And even if they did, Titan Forge gear from Mythic Plus would make a nonsense of it anyway. So, yeah, I mean, that's all gone by the by. But I don't think there's any realistic way of changing it. The other thing is, I could be wrong here. Because the thing is, although I've played World of Warcraft for a good long time, I did take a break in the business, but I've played since vanilla. I haven't always paid a massive amount of attention to community-based stuff, forums, things like that. That has tended to increase over the last probably 6 to 7 years. And I think I would probably say that so I could be wrong on this, but I don't seem to remember when there were American guilds very much in the mix and getting world first. I don't remember it really coming up as an issue. But I may be wrong on that. But I don't remember people going, oh, well, they had the earlier reset. Now, again, part of that could be that if bosses didn't fall down in like the early second reset, then because it becomes less of an issue, it's not worth mentioning. I mean, I'm certain some people will bring it up if Limit get a world first, and I hope they do, or at least I hope someone non-Method do. Again, not wishing Method ill. I just want someone else to win now and then. But yeah, if that did happen, I'm sure someone would point it out. But I would hope that the majority of people would just accept it as what it is. It's just one of those things. I don't think there's anything you can do about it realistically. But who knows? Maybe someone clever can think of a way to do it. But I don't think changing the because as you say there, the maintenance hours would be weird for someone, and weird means you're getting someone to come into work at like 2 o'clock in the morning. No. And as I say, trying to change the fights so that you can't beat them in the first couple of weeks until you've geared up a bit. Again, the Titan Forge system and Mythic Plus dungeon system combined prevent that being realistic either. But there you go. Anyway, so that's that one. I think that might be it for World First discussion for this week. But let's have a look. Yes. So on to... There's been a lot of criticism of Azerite traits, and I may not have finished criticising them myself. But it says here, what was wrong with the Legion way of upgrading your artifact through traits? People seem to love it across the board. Why are we continually chasing the same best traits as we upgrade our item level? The traits should be unlocked in your neck, and UI would be through the neck rather than pieces of armour. There's a level at which I completely agree with that. Although there was a certain amount of criticism with some aspects of the artifacts in Legion, I don't think anyone or any significant number of people criticised the traits system as such, because you just unlocked them all. You got them all. The only discussion about even which path to take around the artifact was for the first few weeks, after which it became irrelevant because you had them all anyway. And when the new ones came out, you quickly got those. And that tended to be fairly circular anyway. So it's... Whereas now, yeah... I agree. A lot of people would have preferred that. The only slight thing, and this is where Blizzard would help if they communicated better. That would then mean that we'd have no need for the Azerite armor pieces. We might as well go back to having tier pieces again. I think the Azerite armor, and this is just me thinking this, I can't know this, was a way of killing two birds with one stone. I think they actively wanted to get rid of tier armor with the rise of Mythic Plus dungeons, because tier armor, of course, associated with raids, and although they had a couple of two set pieces from raids, from dungeons, which as we do now, I don't think they really thought that was all that great. I don't think they saw tier sets with dungeons as being all that fantastic if they were to have like 2 and 4 set bonuses, things like that, as opposed to just a couple of random 2 sets. So I think they wanted to get rid of tier gear from raids, basically. I think that's where it came from first, because otherwise I have little doubt that the neck probably would have been just like the artifacts from Legion. It would have just been a neck instead of a weapon, but otherwise the same. But I think the Azerite armor aspect of it came from, we're not really seeing raid tier gear as making sense in terms of Mythic Plus dungeons, and they saw an opportunity, as I say, to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. That's just me guessing. If Blizzard actually said why, and being honest about it, and said why they changed from the artifact progression system in Legion, which, all of the things aside, people were in favour of, or at least didn't say they were opposed to them, to the system we have now, which a lot of people are very opposed to, then we might be able to argue against it more sensibly. I mean, this is what I keep saying about Blizzard. It's like they'll constantly moan that we're criticising where it's not due because, oh, you're not taking things into account. It's very difficult to take them into account when you don't tell us what things to take into account. You know, if they would only just come out and say, we changed from this system to this system because... But they don't. And when they do, they only just say something vague and useless like, we just think it's a better gameplay experience. You know, that's what they said with personal loot, forced personal loot. Oh, we just think it's a better gameplay experience. Do you? Why? So there you go. Loot boxes one, back again. It says, people would go absolutely mental if WoW implements loot boxes. And it says the quality is already as it is. Well, also second point, if the quality is always bad, you really shouldn't be playing the game. I mean, I always sort of say when I do criticism videos, and now I haven't finished those, people go, why do you play the game if you hate the game? I don't hate the game, I love the game. I just think there's things in it that to improve. But if I ever said that the quality of WoW was shit, I should not be playing. That's the thing I should be saying when I decide to cancel all my subscriptions. It's not the thing I would ever say whilst paying for 3 subscriptions and whatever else every now and then. Although as a casual, at least I don't have to pay for transfers anymore. But to the first one, people would go absolutely mental if WoW implements loot boxes. I don't believe they would implement loot boxes. But if ever it's discussed, I really don't think that in that discussion anyone would put their hand up and says, I don't think we should do it because people would go mental. I don't think they really care about that. People have gone mental about all sorts of things to do with BFA, and it hasn't changed anything. People went mental about GCDs, the changes they made to global cooldowns. Early enough for Blizzard to just cancel the whole thing. They didn't give a monkeys. You know, people went mental about forced personal loot. They don't care. People went mental about Azerite traits and still are doing. Still in the game. They've still done it. You know, okay, that last one was a bit difficult to change stream on. But generally speaking, that even when people have to go proper ballistic, like with flying, that was the only example. I keep going back to it because it's the only example I can think of where a system was completely scrapped. Not just tweaked a little bit to keep people quiet, but completely scrapped as a result of people going mental. So I really don't think it would happen with, because I don't think it would get to that level. Because if they did implement loot boxes, doesn't actually affect an awful lot of people. I'd be opposed for it for completely different reasons. I just think it, and it's possible that Blizzard are not doing it for the same reason. It potentially abuses people who, it's the same sort of thing as gambling basically. It's encouraging people to spend money that they wouldn't ordinarily spend because it does it in such a way that makes it look like you're not actually spending very much. That's what I have with the issue with loot boxes. But yeah, I really don't think that would be an argument against it at all. The fact that people go mental about all sorts of things. And at least, you know, Blizzard have that perception anyway. You know, they have this perception. That's why they don't communicate very much. They've done quite a bit very recently because they've been doing a lot of firefighting. As soon as they think they've dealt with the problem, they'll stop communicating again. That's actually quite distressing, really. The fact that there's been a lot more communication very recently, noticeably so, in various formats. I'm not just talking about the AMA. In various forms, there's been a lot more communication. Which, again, puts paid to the idea when they say, oh, there's not enough time to do it. You found time to do it in the last couple of weeks, haven't you? So I'm not really sure I believe that. But nonetheless, as soon as they think that the fire's been put out, they'll just go back to being quiet again. But yeah, anyway. And the next one, there's a couple of things here. It says, I enjoy your channel, blah, 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 blah. But a couple of criticisms. On the vague response to the Shami question, I think they did right. If one class gets perceived extra communication, then half of the forums are up in arms because they didn't. It's a shame, but I think they played that one right. Well, my argument here would be, the forums are up in arms anyway because of the thing that needs the feedback. So what's the difference between getting a load of shit because you're not communicating at all and getting a load of shit because you're communicating to one forum and not another. They get all that anyway. And then they get it regardless. So they might as well just do the right thing, I think, is communicating, even if it's not enough. Some communication is better than no communication. Yes, when you communicate, when you do the some communication instead of enough communication, because there's no reason why they can't communicate to all of them. Just take the reins off the developers. Allow the class designers to bloody say things to the public, to the sweaty masses, to us, the customers. And you'd be amazed how much time they suddenly find they've got, because it doesn't take that much time. If each developer spent half an hour a week, you're not telling me they can't give them half an hour a week just to say something on the forum. I mean, they don't have to read through the forums and see what's interesting. The bloody community managers, it's their job to go through all that. Give them a few posts. You might want to click at some of these links, you know, and reply to one or two of them that you think are interesting. It's half an hour a week. No time at all. If every single developer did that, every single one in their area of interest, then the forums would be awash with blue posts. Absolutely awash. There's hundreds of buggers. So yeah, but when we come, if they're given that they're not going to do that, that they don't do that, if you're going to say, well, we can only give feedback to 5% of the player base, so we'd better not give feedback to anyone. No, that's just silly. Because all you're doing is saying we'd rather have 100% of the player base moaning that we're not giving them any feedback, as opposed to 95%. I'd actually take the 95% moaning, as opposed to 100% moaning. On to the second point. It says, second point, I disagree with your comment about heroic and normal raids not matching about composition. Theoretically, you are, of course, right. However, a large proportion of raiders at this level think they are top-end players and don't want to deviate from what they see the likes of Method doing. The thing is, though, that Blizzard can't help that. If people cannot see the difference between what is needed for their guild to succeed and what Method do, then that's not on Blizzard. That's not Blizzard's fault. That's their fault. I really don't think that they need to worry too much about that. They shouldn't worry too much about that anyway. You know, that's down to them. It says they are, of course, blinkered in their outlook, but what high-level guilds bring to a raid is often rigidly replicated lower down the chain. Yes, it is. I've seen the same thing myself. It doesn't even have to be in heroic and normal. Lower down the mythic chain, you will get the same sort of thinking, which is complete nonsense. An absolute nonsense. Because when you're so far behind, again, your gear pushes you through, not your composition. Except with certain fights where, you know, because in Mythic, you see, it's not like in Heroic where you can outgear mechanics. If something's designed to kill you, it will kill you in Mythic no matter how much you outgear it. You know, I mean, you've seen this in final raids, especially, you know, ones, I mean, Legion wasn't so bad, but in other ones where you've had like a year of farming it, you can have a year's worth of having the best gear. Everyone in your raid's basically got the best gear because you've been farming the hell out of it for a year. And that mechanic will still kill you. If you get that mechanic wrong, it will still kill you. The advantage that the gear brings is there'll be fewer of those mechanics because you'll get through each phase more quickly because you're extra DPS. But the mechanics will still kill you even at that point. But beyond that, it does. I mean, we're talking about Coven, for example. You know, if you wanted to kill it super quickly, you took loads of Warlocks and Shadow Priests and you didn't take much, if any, melee. Well, the guild I was in, we had, like, I think, one Warlock. No. Yeah, one Warlock, one Shadow Priest, who then left the guild, but we still cleared it the next week. And, like, 7 melee. Still killed it. Didn't kill it quickly. There's still wipes. But we still killed it. Just took longer. So if you're behind that far anyway, then yeah. But that's their fault. That's not Blizzard's fault. Blizzard shouldn't have to take account of things like that. I'll never criticize. I mean, although I do say that sometimes Blizzard might want to take account of perceptions as well. I don't think they should completely ignore them. But also, I don't think they should feel responsible either. If a misconception is out there, they can do more to try and tackle that misconception, but ultimately it's not their fault. But anyway, Next one. So, back to Azerite traits. It says, thus I'm greatly disappointed with Blizzard and the jerk of Azerite traits. Now, interestingly, there's nothing particular about that comment I want to say, but there is a post on the US forums, which I shall link down below. And Hakili posted something in there in terms of his solutions. And I've talked about this before because he tweeted about his suggestions some time ago, which I thought were very good. And the way he's laid it out is, I mean, if everyone did this on forums, you know, this would be marvellous. So what is, I'll read it out for people who maybe can't see. It says, the solution is to change how Azerite powers unlock and scale. So he's identified current problems. 1, you can get item level upgrades that you don't want to wear because the traits will be locked. 2, when you have had bad luck with Azerite drops, you're completely out of luck until the next reset when you can try again. And that is doubly true because from raids, of course, well, you've done those bosses. You can't go back and do the same bosses. And from dungeons, you can't get them dropping Mythic Plus dungeons. You can only get them in your cache. And they're not really drop. I mean, we've had 2 caches. I haven't had an Azerite piece in either of them. So all my Azerite armor is still like 340. My Azerite armor pieces. Because I don't raid either. I'm just doing the Mythic Plus now. Playing twice a week. So, yeah, that's fun. And it's holding me back. So it says, easiest fix, 5 points. 1, remove the minimum level requirement for each Azerite power slot. 2, scale Azerite powers with your next level rather than the armor's item level. 3, implement a maximum level for each Azerite power slot. 4, set that maximum level a bit lower on Mythic Plus and maybe PvP gear than raid gear. And 5, let Azerite gear drop normally in Mythic Plus. Now on the last point, the letting Azerite gear drop normally in Mythic Plus is something I potentially want to cover in a separate video, but the issue there is what we've had ultimately is a series of, they did have the strategy for Mythic Plus and Azerite gear, and then they changed a couple of things that had knock-on effects, and it's no longer a coherent strategy anymore. And that's the problem they've got themselves into. And I know an awful lot of people have said, well, let's just let Azerite gear drop normally in Mythic Plus. But that creates a problem of its own that they tried to solve with their overall, what was in theory a coherent strategy. It's just because they changed a couple of aspects of it, then it's fallen to pieces. But then it says, onto gameplay experience, it says 1, you can now farm Mythic Plus gear as much as you want and actually have a real shot at the gear with the powers you want. 2, the gear isn't overpowered compared to raid gear, since its powers will not scale up to or beyond raid gear. 3, when you pick up Azerite armor, you can wear it without feeling that you've lost anything. 4, if your 325 Azerite armor reaches its maximum potential at neck level 16 and you get a 340 Azerite armor with the same powers, those powers might scale up to neck level 20, preserving the power differential. Which would work. I mean, you know, if you implemented all those things, it would work. The problem with Blizzard is, once they start fixing things, they just, it's sticky plaster. You know, they do a thing. But the problem is, and then the whole system loses its coherency. Whereas what we've got here is an overall different approach to Azerite. It's like considering just the overall strategy again. Whereas what Blizzard do is they try and keep the original strategy and change the individual tactics within it, but it's just going in a completely different direction. It's a bit like having an army saying, oh, our strategy is to go north, and then you start having some units go to the east without ever correcting it and getting back to the north again. It's like, before you know it, your whole army is basically going east. So change your strategy so that, oh, well, let's move our army east. It's just weird how they're doing it with just trying to do one change. One change, whether it's to keep people quiet or the thing it's good, but it changes the overall system and philosophy. And they need to rethink, they need to tear it down more often. Just accept that something is now not working, tear it all down, start again. It's not like it takes ages. With something like this, it would not take ages. These fixes are relatively easy to implement. In fact, they're actually super easy to implement. You know, they've made a big showing of the fact that they've changed the architecture of the game to account for scaling anyway. Scaling should be one of the easiest things to put in. But anyway... right, on to a couple of sillier ones, but just not really WoW-related ones. So the first one. Are we talking about football or soccer? I've had this before. I'm prepared for you now. So, here we go. This is a foot. This is a hand. So, never mind which one came first. We all know which one came first. Let us try and think about this. Which sport should be called football? The one where in the field of play the ball is moved around with the hand, or the one where it's moved around by the foot? Answers on a postcard, please. And finally, we've got an idiot's corner. I've had a few that potentially I could put into for this, but I always say I don't like to put ones in where either I think there's two options. Either they're trolling or they actually are genuinely thick. I don't want to point people out who are actually, you know, if you're stupid, then that's unfortunate. But, you know, we all have our crosses to bear. But it was this one. It says it's called Ask Me Anything, Not Answer You Anything. This was to do with the AMA. So... And this was my criticism of where Ian Hazacosta said, oh, I'm not the right person to answer that question. And I said, well, it's an obvious question you were going to be asked. You should have had people in the room that could have helped you out with anything that's not in your area of expertise. And someone said, it's called Ask Me Anything, Not Answer You Anything. As if he could have just gone onto the AMA and just accepted all the questions and said nothing in response. If someone says, ask me anything, it's more... And I actually said this in the video. I made it super clear in the video. The implication, the very strong, couldn't be stronger implication is that you will therefore answer anything. So in actual fact, it is called Answer You Anything, because if you say, ask me anything, that means, if I ever say, ask me a question, even on a narrow subject, it means I'm going to answer the questions you ask me, as long as it's on that narrow subject. But this is an Ask Me Anything, which means people could have asked what brand of toilet paper he preferred. Okay, I'm glad people didn't, or at least I hope they didn't. So yes, given that it was a very relevant question and on to do with his role as game developer, he should have been able to answer it. Absolutely, no, it's the stupidest comment that wasn't made by someone who might actually genuinely be a very low intellect. I think that's just someone not thinking things through. But anyway, I shall leave you with that one. Thanks very much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share. And until next time, I'll see you later.